in some ways, the recent attacks to lawyers, to university staff, to federal employees, those are some of the most stable jobs you can think of.
That's
These,
right.
really cutting to the core of our idea of economic stability and really cutting to core to the middle class and upper middle class means that everybody is sort of seeing how precarious our situation is, not just those who are closer to the edge of being able to pay their bills. So I think one of the things that we wrestle with at Fair Fight and I wrestle with is we want to both talk about defending our democracy, but we all got to be real. Like there
That's
were
right.
less voters in this 2024 election than there were 4 years ago. That means like our democracy, we already know, was a little bit on the rocks. Now we're just being forced to deal with it. So it's dark, but every crisis is an opportunity. And we're going to rebuild a democracy that serves us through this. I have to believe, just like we think back to Selma and the civil rights movement, that democracy was not serving or fully represented its people. So it was defending the ideals of America through the civil rights movement, but
That's right.
reimagining a democracy.
That's right.
And so I think it's really important that those of us who are on this call are no doubt relatively privileged people, that we are like kind of lock in, that we don't want to become small c conservatives defending this idea of the American dream or
Right.
defending this idea of democracy that is at this point pretty broken and disconnected by so many Americans who aren't even voting for so many reasons. So, number one, I think about that a lot, Nicole, and that goes to your question, which is how do we defend and promote voting rights in a context where there's just confusion about what is our democracy doing? What is it worth? Trump was democratically elected. Like, what does it all mean? So, number one, at the bottom line goes back to what LaTosha was saying. Collective action is the only solution. And that looks like collective action by voters demanding fair elections. It looks like collective action by institutions
That's right.
standing up for each other, right? We're not seeing a good job of that right now. The media is being chilled, universities are being chilled, law firms are being chilled. We're going to need to do collective action. So the voting rights community, now we're talking about how do we have collective action? How do we stand up for each other? Because right
Right.
now, the chilling and divide and conquer, the courts only get us so much. They're not going to save us, right? And so at the end of the day, we at Fair Fight and Fair Fight Action, Nicole is in the Capitol fighting to track bad bills. And, we're all over the region working with allies like Black Voters Matter to fight bad bills and to promote, better election law and more access for American citizens, fighting bad bills in Congress. All of that, all sort of what I would call the traditional voting rights, voter protection work, yes, but that is inadequate for this moment. We've got to deepen our organizing.
That's
So
right.
at Fair Fight, we are redoubling our commitment to working with partners like Black Voters Matter, who have longitudinal organizing in communities, with our allies across the region in the South, and to our own work and our own network. Part of the reason we're having these Fair Fight togethers is really reaching out to our network and involving more people in the conversation. If you listen to all the experts on autocracy, modern and historic, it is organizations with deep roots with the people
That's right.
and in coalition
That's
with
right.
other organizations, broad, not even coalitions where we have to agree with everything all the time, but broad coalitions. So as we think about voting rights, we think about it pretty expansively. We think about building a large and deep coalition of folks who want the people to decide their future,
That's right.
right? And that looks like sort of what I would call more traditional partnerships within the voting rights space. And then also thinking about, we work with folks who are in the closet, anti-MAGA, anti-conspiracy theory Republicans who are just as committed to this mission as we are, but they are sort of like have to hide a little bit in the shadows, but they wield their power in other ways. So we think about it expansively. And so I think ultimately, to answer your question, Nicole, I think what the guardrails are and are going to save us is literally the participation of voters.
Right.
There are bad bills, very, very draconian bills. I know we're going to get into this that are being looked at the state and federal level that would disenfranchise millions of American citizens. They may be able to pass, but that's when we go back to our voting rights and civil rights history. Those are not going to be just laws.
That's right.
And so it's going to require organizations, leaders, activists, voters to dig deep to say, we are not going to accept this. And
That's right.
whether it's 600 people having to sit down and, in inconvenient places for people in power, if it's mass mobilization, if it's whatever it needs to be, those are the conversations we're having. So yes, all the traditional, the lobbying, the litigation, the coalition work, all the normal, but that's inadequate for this moment, which is why we're thrilled for this type of conversation. What are your thoughts, LaTosha?
I ditto to everything that you said. I see mine and I put it in buckets. I think of my answer in buckets. I think it's money, methodology, and message. And what I mean by that is, I'll start with the methodology. That it, throwing events and organizing are not the same. And so I think that there has been a tendency for some organizations that do kind of this electoral work just to do what I call kind of the round the voters up things. We're going to have an event and we're just going to round people up. There's no real relationship. There's no ongoing relationship. One of the things that I think is very, which I really appreciate about the work of Fair Fight, and I think it's similar in our work as well, is that we don't leave. When the election is over, we don't shut down camp.
That's right.
And then come back up. We stay. We're in the fight. We're committed in the fight. We maintain our relationships with the communities that we're working on, and we're building. So there's a lot of good, what I call street cred, that we have out there that allows us the space to really be able to have these conversations, to organize people. And so I think in terms of the methodology, we have to push even organizations that are doing this work to move beyond kind of this episodic event kind of model to deep organizing, that we literally have to be in conversation. That part of what we know that we're coming up against, and we saw this last election cycle, the level of disinformation, misinformation. I mean, the information that just came out today or this week, where that Facebook had employees embedded in the Trump campaign, helping and assisting them around the social media pieces. When we're looking at how even what we're seeing, these technology platforms that align themselves with autocracy, right? So we're seeing this across the board. Didn't just start now, right? Didn't just start on November 5th. We've been screaming, some of us have been screaming this for the longest. And so I do think that, one, the first in terms of methodology, it is important that everybody should be organizing right now. Whoever you are, right? You should be, if you're not organizing, your organization is not organizing, you should be in support or really connected, affiliated with an organization right now. It's really important. Money, because what we know is that there was over $1 billion that was spent. There was an article that just came out recently where $1 billion was spent by the Republicans to actually towards voter suppression efforts.
That's right.
$1 billion, right? This is documented. I think NCRP did the report.
Yeah, it was a philanthropy group, did a deep dive. Yep.
Yes, the National Committee on Responsive Philanthropy.
That's
They
exactly
did a
right.
report where $1 billion was spent just on voter suppression issues, right? And to help foster that legislation. I think the third thing really is around message. I think we have to have a message that we believe in this democracy we're fighting for. But what is it that we're fighting for? I think that's the part, Lauren, that you were talking about, that we share, like radically reimagining. What is our North Star? Instead of us responding to every bad thing that is happening now, even though we've got to do some harm reduction, we've got to think and dream bigger. That this is a moment for, as things are like we can actually, in my opinion, we should be shooting for the chaos and the calmness to come out of this crazy storm. And so those of us who have been steadfast in this work, I think it's really important for us to really recognize in this moment, we should be getting prepared to even go deeper and even stronger and more intensified around the need for a multicultural, multiracial democracy. That ultimately what we're seeing now, we're seeing law firms, like think about it. We're seeing, like, no matter who you are, we're seeing law firms, some law firms that have actually not only taken supported liberal causes, but conservative causes. We're seeing law firms that like defend everybody, that they're being targeted and attacked. That is an attack on what I think is our First Amendment. There's an attack on democracy on all levels in terms of the freedom of speech, the freedom of movement, for us gathering, all of that in the integrity of those elections. And so if our democracy is to be what we desire and what we're envisioning it to be, Lauren, it's going to require all of us to actually work our muscles. We're going to have to work our muscles right now. And so I do think that,
100%.
that all of us should be doing those three things: money, message, methodology. Support a organization that is doing organizing work right now. Write a check, if it's $5, $25, whatever it is, and a message. You are the best messengers. Who are the people in your communities, in your family? We should be talking. This should be like the best gossip campaign ever, that we're literally telling people around the possibilities of what exists and what it is that we desire, what we need, and how we can fight back.
100%. What's cracking me up right now, LaTosha, is for like almost 20 years, I have used in a million presentations the 3 M's, and mine are almost exactly the same. You're going to like mine
Really?
too. Money, message, and mobilization, which
Yes,
is, another piece here. I think one of the ways that I've been digesting this is we're up against a propaganda machine,
that's right.
right? I don't even use the word disinformation anymore because this is now just, we are
It's just propaganda.
inundated with
Absolutely.
propaganda. We have major media companies coming to heel, getting sued by Trump and paying him all this money. I mean, we are in a very brave new world. So when you're in propaganda machines, that means your human connections and your human resistance and your human organizing is so important. So here's my anecdote. As you know, I'm a very political person, very active. I belong to a gym. That is the only space. I really don't talk about politics. I'm friends with all different kinds of people. I've figured out some are Republican, some are. One day at the gym, this woman that I've gotten to know, I see her just like hyperventilating, like, look, at something was up. So I walk over to her and I pull her aside. What is going on? And she kind of looks me dead in the eye and is like, I think I'm having a panic attack. It's
Mm,
all the Trump news. This is a woman who works in corporate America, completely not directly impacted.
wow.
Why I share this is it was for me out of my comfort zone because I just generally don't go there in that moment. So in that moment, I just talked to her, right? And then I gave her some resources after. And now, we can talk about after. My point is, in your workplace, in your family, in your community, this is an opportunity
That's right.
for some human connection. And that is a small act of organizing because now I can text her and tell her to turn out to something, right? I just think this is a moment where resisting this, opposing this, we want to look for those signs. And so my suggestion to folks who have a normal day job, who don't get to do this all day, it is a privilege, but it is something else to be doing this work professionally. Nicole, LaTosha, I can say, but for those of you who are in a different kind of more traditional workplace, my suggestion is think about this like a healthy habit or a special habit, like something that you do like at least once a week. You do something, be it going to a rally, be it going to a church community group that's going to do something for the homeless. Find something every week that is meaningful in your community. That could be something small, something big. But I think if we can do something every week, maybe it's that you have a network of confused young people and they read your social media. I think that is a way to sort of, we're not going to fight this all at once. And let's be real. Let's be real right now. This is going to get worse before it gets better. These guys have
Oh,
a lot of power.
absolutely.
And it's, I'm sure lots of people on the Zoom read the news. We don't even have agreement at the highest levels of the Democratic Party in Congress right now, let alone a path forward. So there's going to be a lot more chaos. We're all going to collectively find a way. But I think if we can do something every week, those of you who have more time every day, or if you have less time, you're really busy parenting or doing caregiving once a month, I think pick a metric that you can hit. And then if you're not sure, your metric can be given $25 to LaTosha's organization or Fair Fight. It can be something pretty passive if you don't have the time. But I think that is a way to get our arms around this because literally that's what it's going to take. And I think people feel so powerless right now. But the reality is we do have the power. I was on a podcast recently, and then I'll pass it back to you, Nicole. The moderator is a sort of a never Trumper type, Galen Reed. He's wonderful. He's an independent now. And he was like, well, if they defy the courts, what's the accountability? And what I said to him, LaTosha, I will say to you in this audience, we are. The
We
people
are. Oh, that's
are. We
the
are the enforcement
yes.
mechanism. We
Yes.
literally are the enforcement mechanism. And it
We
may
are
not
the
be,
enforcement. Yes.
yeah, we may not be clear on how this is all going to come together just yet.
Yes.
But I think about before the terrible Hamas attack in the Middle East, think about the resistance to Netanyahu
That's
that
right.
Israelis were doing on their court takeover and their autocratic takeover of Netanyahu. Those were massive mobilizations,
That's right.
right? So I think there's other examples we can look around on what's going to eventually be required of us. And I think collective action is that's how we can be safe together. That's why there were 600 people, which might seem relatively small, rather than 60 people on that
That's
bridge,
right.
right? We're going to have to do powers and numbers, and I think it's going to look a lot of different ways.
I agree. Ditto, ditto.
Thank you guys. And I've said it already, we've all said it, and I think we'll probably all say it again, but like the collective organizing piece is really key to all of this. And like our history shows, it's going to be what helps us get through it, even though, like has been said, things will get worse before they get better. And so one thing I want to draw back to is the point about the all-out attack on our democracy that we're facing right now, right? It's like we said, it's incredibly well funded, it's strategic, it's happening all across the board in individual states across the country at the local level. But we can use this collective money, message, and mobilization around some of these fights. And so one of those fights is happening or is looming at the federal level, but also actually seeing it in over 20 states right now. And so that would be the SAVE Act. And so this is a piece of legislation that we've seen before in Congress, but it's come back and it's at the federal level, but we're seeing similar versions of it in, like I said, over 20 states across the country. And this piece of legislation would undoubtedly disenfranchise millions and millions of people. It would upend automatic voter registration, third party voter registration by mail. It would disenfranchise people from because you are married and you changed your last name, to people who live in rural areas, to people who are impacted by hurricanes and wildfires and other natural disasters. So I want to start with you, Lauren, if you could tell us about this piece of legislation, how it would impact voters and harm them, and also draw in the piece that we've been talking about a lot, the collective organizing that we can do around this.
Yeah, it's we like to call it the Stopping Voters Act.
That's right.
Um, and it is based on the lie of mass voter fraud. And it is, which is a fundamental, goes back beyond Jim Crow to this idea that there are all these folks who shouldn't be voting. It's based on that lie. But this is a huge priority for the anti-voter conspiracy theorist, MAGA and MAGA adjacent folks who continue to this day say that Biden didn't win the 2020 election, and that entire kind of conspiracy of far right wing actors. This is a huge priority of theirs because it would disenfranchise roughly 21 million Americans. That's the Bread and Center estimate of what the SAVE Act would do, the Stop Voter Act. And it was introduced in previous Congresses. It has been reintroduced in this Congress. We expect it to start moving this spring. And the basics on it, what you need to know, because it's in a state near you too, there are state versions of state acts being introduced by Republican legislators in many, many states. And the idea is to create a huge barrier. Number one, only American citizens can vote in federal elections, period. That's the law. Think about when you sign up to vote, you attest that you're a citizen. Non-citizens do not vote. There's been very few instances. The SAVE Act would require, if you were to register or re-register, if you move, you would need to show in person to an elections official the paper original document of your birth certificate, passport, or your military papers. And lots of problems there. Most Americans do not have a passport. Most Americans are not in the military. And then most Americans could not provide to you on a dime their original birth certificate. First of all, that would cost money for many of us to actually get a certified copy. And number two, many of us do not have the same name as what was printed on that birth certificate through marriage, through divorce, through name changes. So Brennan's estimate is that passed as written, it would disenfranchise 21 million Americans, massively disenfranchised married women whose last names have changed. And the idea that there needs to be this requirement is, in my view, fundamentally un-American and just erecting a barrier to our fundamental right to express ourselves. And so this goes part of a very big playbook that is happening and has been underway for some time. since the Voting Rights Act was passed, and trying to curtail all of the rights given to Black Americans, and the attempts that our government made in the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act to rectify and to protect against those wrongs, right? Up until the Voting Rights Act in Shelby versus Holder in the first Obama administration was overturned by the courts, the South has no longer protected Black voters in the way that it should. And we have seen all these voter suppression laws pass that target everybody with a special focus on Black Americans. So this comes as part, again, like they're running a multi-pronged strategy here. This is just one piece of it. And this is a great example. If there's one thing you do this week, call your member in the House, in the US House, and call your members in the US Senate and tell them to oppose the so-called SAVE Act. We can put some info in the chat. There's some good public resources from Brennan. For those of you helping, you can put them in there. We think we can beat this bill. It's so draconian. It brings criminal penalties to elections officials if they mess this up in any way. So elections officials are really organized against it. There's bipartisan opposition. But I think it's a good example of the kind of pernicious effort that's getting sort of permission and escalated in this current moment.
Right.
We're seeing a version of this introduced in more than 20 states. We're seeing this push at the federal level, all with this idea that only voting on election day is that's the only proper way to vote. They filed litigation in Mississippi to prevent ballots from overseas and military voters that are received the day or two after the election, saying that those should not be counted, even though they are cast before the election, and there's strong protections for military and overseas voters in our federal law. There's just this week, the Fifth Circuit, famous for giving us the Dobbs decision down here in the South, LaTosha,
Yes.
just had a very radical opinion on this, basically saying that those ballots shouldn't be permitted. So that's going to gear up for a Supreme Court fight. So we're going to see more court fights. We're going to see Federalist Supreme Court not necessarily do the right thing here. We're going to see federal bills. We're going to see state bills. So if you want to know the latest, sign up, go to fairfight.com, sign up for our email list. We'll send out all the details as things start to move. And if anything's moving in your state, we do sometimes state-specific alerts. But for the Federal SAVE Act, if you want to get involved. But this is just one of what we expect to be a really big push. When I say it's going to get worse before it gets better, they're going to do whatever they can to try to make next year's election unfair. Let's be real. Let's be real. We know after the 2020 election, it all came out that all of our paranoid fantasies were valid, right? They were looking to do all of the extreme things, and now they are even more emboldened and more organized. So we need to be ready again, where we're fighting these fights, fighting them in Congress, doing our work to educate and push our elected officials, not just to vote against, but to do more, to really work with their colleagues across ideology to get them to preserve Americans' constitutional voting rights. And also we have to do the deep organizing, because we do not have enough power in Congress. We do not have enough power in the courts of people who are going to defend American democracy. So it's going to take, I don't know exactly what flavor, it's going to take overwhelming turnout next year. It's going to take overwhelming protest, most likely. It's going to take Americans coming together and fighting for a new and better democracy together.
Oh, I am clear, Lauren. I won't go through all of the pieces because I do want people to read information about this. Is a really, really bad piece of legislation, but I think it's important for people, particularly those that are joining us for this conversation. You obviously care about this democracy, and you care about voting and having fair and free elections. We cannot shift our eyes off that. There are all kinds of things that are being thrown out, like I said earlier, and the chaos is the point. That's the point. The point is that we'll get so overwhelmed that we will stop fighting. I think what we have to do is we also have to look at our fight strategically now, that not only are there those that are fighting on the federal level that are doing national work, but we really, really, really got to hyper focus on the state level. right, on state and local, and in our local communities, but particularly in our states, and those of us that live in the South. But I see a lot of people who are on here who are in New York. New York got some voter suppression issues, right? And some of our people who have joined us from other places across the country, we are seeing, currently we're literally living in the Southern strategy. Like, I'd like to tell people, welcome to the South. Like,
That's right.
America is the South. If you're below the Canadian borderline right now, you're technically the Dixon line has Mason Dixon line has moved up to Canada. And so I think we have to really recognize that it's not going to just stop, that what we see is we see in these conservative Republican supermajority states, we're seeing kind of these different iterations of these bills, but then it gives the momentum for it to be nationally. And so that's why we have to resist on the local level. Where we're seeing it pop up locally, we also have to make sure that we're monitoring, we're resisting. Two, we have to challenge every seat of power. It's time. Like, every seat of power that is out there, that literally every person that is running has to have a position. We need to know their position on voting rights. I don't care what it's for. It can be a city council race. Every single person, we should make it, that should be our mantra of really recognizing and knowing where they stand on voting rights. If voting rights is to be an issue, and the protection of elections and the integrity of elections, it's not the sexiest topic, is it, Lauren? It's not the sexiest topic in the world. So those of us who really understand that all our other issues really are resting on our ability to be able to participate in democracy, we have to be relentless. We have to be relentless in this space right now. And so, to your point, Nicole, I think some of the things that I would like for people to think about, one is putting pressure, not just on the federal level, but they need to be putting pressure on their state, right? And they need to be sending letters, like at this point, like sending letters, calling. We have to do much, much more to advocate, writing, like the things that we can do to actually lift and amplify this. This is what we need to do now, not in isolation, but just an example of what has been a continuation of something that many of us have been fighting for years.
I'll do a quick plug too, in addition to that, is I don't care where you are sitting, which county in America, which parish, if you're in Louisiana, where you're sitting in America, you should be, if you have any spare time, which if you're on the Zoom at 7:42 p.m. Eastern, you probably do, get involved with your local elections officials. Go to your Board of Election meetings, go to those meetings during public comment, give them attaboys and attagirls if they're doing the right thing on access, or push them to increase access. But the other side, the anti-voter folks are very mobilized. I don't care if you're in the bluest county in New York, they're probably there giving the pro-voter advocates a hard time. So get involved in supporting your Board of Election members. Most places around the country, they usually have like a monthly meeting or so. The other place is to raise your hand to be a poll worker. A lot of states have special elections or municipal elections in the spring or in the fall this year. It's a great way to get started. You'll get paid a little bit of money, you'll get trained up, and then next year when the need is really big. So that goes back to the people are the solution, is literally it's community members who literally run elections in our country. And the folks doing that work are the backbone of our ability to have fair elections. And so it seems so simple, but you and maybe your best friend or a fellow retiree or a colleague just raising your hand to do that and taking maybe a couple days off work or doing early vote on the weekends or just doing election day and then going to this can make a huge difference. So I always encourage everybody to do that no matter where you are in the country. It just matters so, so much. If you're in Georgia and you want your hand held a little bit on that, we work with concerned citizens volunteers all over the state to give them support and how to be a strong pro-voter advocate in their boards of elections. And you can shoot us a note on that.
Yep. I saw a couple of comments. One, there are key elections happening, both in New Jersey and Virginia. The gubernatorial election in New Jersey. I think it's important. And I saw another question around, there are ways to impact the vote talent. I'm not an expert in that, so I can't really speak to that. As an expert in it, what I will say is, do you trust these people? Like, I think that we have to overwhelm. It has to, the elections have to be so convincing that there's little room for error, right? And however you like, I think that we have to have as many people engaged as possible in this process. To me, when I see a high turnout, that gives me the higher the turnout, that gives me confidence that that the outcome, that at the end of the day, it validates kind of the election process for me in many ways. And so I think it's important, as we're seeing these pieces come up. I don't know. I can't speak to that. I don't know what they're able to do and not do with computers and technology and all of that. But what I will say is, what I know, that when we've been up against voter suppression and the various tactics, because what we don't understand is it's like death by 1,000 cuts. Some things that seem like it's harmless. Oh, that's just a voter ID. So you shave off a couple of 100,000 there. Or some is around gerrymandering. You save off. And so there's literally this multitude, it's like these layered tactics of voter suppression that have actually impacted. I absolutely believe that they've impacted election outcomes in this country. And so part of what I think is really important is that we have to do everything. We have to work twice as hard as we've ever worked before to make sure that we get the kind of results and the turnout. I'm like Lauren, I think that goes on the t-shirt. Like, there in this democracy, the only answer, the only thing, there's no tool, there's no blue pill, there's nothing that can actually save this democracy but the people. And just as Lauren said, I don't think it's a matter of saving it. It's a matter of us. I always challenge people to not think of, and I've been saying this for years, to go beyond thinking of yourselves as a citizen of this nation. And you have to start thinking as founders of a new nation, a nation yet to be unborn, a nation that all other citizens, all the people in this nation are treated with dignity and respect. You ain't got to like them, but at least dignity, their humanity, right? That a nation that ultimately we will have free and fair elections. That's all we want, right, Lauren?
That's right. We can bear losing an election if our favorite candidate doesn't win, if the rules of the game are fair. And
we can handle that.
That's right. And there's true, honest discourse about the issues of the day, and the very pressing issues of the day that are not getting very much attention, are they, right now? All right, Nicole, what do you have for us?
No, I mean, I can just sit back and listen to y'all. I feel inspired. I've learned things. And one thing I want to put an emphasis on, a couple of the things that y'all have each said as we kind of close out the evening. Right? Like, there's the bad things they're doing aren't really new, right? They're just putting lipstick on a pig, we've all seen before. We need to collectively organize. Each of us can do something every day, big or small. Every time you go somewhere, you can find somebody you can talk to about something that's going on, or encourage them to get involved. But then it's also about doing things year round and not just in big election years, right? Like it was said, we have local elections here in Georgia. There are big elections all across the country. And so there's a lot we can do and that we should be doing. And Fair Fight and Black Voters Matter are incredible organizations to be involved with, to do this work. And so, as two leaders in this space, and in organizing in the South and in protecting voting rights in the South, are there any kind of like parting words you want to leave people with? I think we started off with like doom and gloom. This is the bad situation. We've gotten some like bits of hope throughout. So is there anything y'all want to leave people with for motivation or inspiration?
Yeah, I don't know if Lauren, you want to go first or me. Lauren, have you ever seen Interstellar?
I have not, no.
You've not. Okay. All right. I don't know if anybody has seen. Have you seen it, Nicole? Okay. So Interstellar is this kind of movie about kind of space exploration. And I watched the movie because Matthew McConaughey is in it, and I think he's cute. So I watched it. Right. But on a boring Saturday afternoon, and I watched the film, and I mean, it's a good film, but the context of it really just took my mind around thinking about possibilities and universes and other worlds. And I raise that because for the last few years, I really have been kind of obsessed with stars and thinking about people like Harriet Tubman. Part of what facilitated that for me was this idea that Harriet Tubman, who could not neither read or write, followed this North Star, right? And so I'm saying to myself, I'm like, okay, I'm like, well, it's obviously in my mind, I thought the North Star was the brightest. And I share this all the time. The North Star is not the brightest star in the sky. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, but it is the most consistent. It is dependable. It is always there. You can always find it. So you can always locate yourself because it's always available to be seen by the naked eye. A prevented cloud covering, that kind of thing. But what was interesting is when I realized that, I was like, you know what? It's consistency and dependability that makes a difference. That sometimes this work is sexy, sometimes it's not sexy. Like, who wants to talk about like voting like right now? That's a really, really like taboo topic for many people. They don't want to talk about. Thank you, Evelyn. And obviously me and Lauren want to talk about it. So, but those of us who really have kind of this passion and really understand how important it is, I want us to see ourselves kind of like that North Star. I want us to see ourselves as we have to be the most dependable, the most consistent around this issue and not let it go. And then the second thing that came out of the stars for me was that there's something called, I called them phantom stars, but I found out later I was wrong. It's called a dead star. And so dead stars are stars that you're looking in the sky and you'll see a star, but that star has been dead maybe 1 million years ago. But it's all you're seeing really is you're seeing the residue of its former glory days. That when it was a star, you're now seeing it took that long for that light to get there, and now you're seeing it. But that star is over, and so I'm hoping, like, to me, that's almost kind of prophetic of what I think is in this moment. That in this moment, yes, we are up against some really crazy authoritarian fascist foolishness. We are, right? But it is in the dark, like even now when it's still light outside, there's stars in the sky. I can't see them. I can't see the stars when the sun is shining, but it's in the nighttime. So in this dark night of what we are seeing, in the dark night of the American soul right now, this is the moment that the stars are needed. This is the moment that the stars shine. And there's some stars that people are looking at, those stars are dead. We're going to make sure that they die and as they flame out, but their new stars are being born. And so, I'm hoping that in this moment that, as you said, Lauren, that I think it's going to get pretty rocky. That one, I hope that, my parting words, I hope that we lean into our humanity and recognize that even the work that we're doing to build democracy is a means to an end, not an end in itself. The means to an end is democracy is a vehicle for us to be in service, to recognize that every single human being has agency and has value and should be able to participate in any decision being made about them and their family. The second thing is, I hope in this moment that we're recognizing that we got to work. This is the moment that if we're creating the world that we want, that whatever exists will be a result of what we do or we don't do. And so if we want greater, we want more, we want better, we're going to have to lean into that. And then the third and the final thing that I'll say is we need each other. I know I need you, Lauren and Nicole. I know I need Fair Fight. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you all are doing this work. And so grateful to have the opportunity for us to do this work. But I am hoping that people who are listening, that you are finding political organizations to support, political organizations that you're getting your information from, and you become a megaphone and to amplify good, real, true information, because we're being bombarded with information that is bad or hurtful or harmful, misleading or miscalculated. And so we really need to multiply ourselves. So I hope the people that are on this call see themselves as ambassadors to this work. And that's I'll turn it over to you, Lauren.
Yeah, that's really well said. I'm going to give I have a couple hyper practical how to get through this. One of my best piece of advice for anybody who is really struggling with just the day-to-day news cycle, personal impacts of Trump, family impacts of Trump. We're sitting here in Atlanta. My closest friends in Atlanta outside of politics work at the CDC, and it's like they're getting psychological warfare, waged on them, federal workers right now. My suggestion for how to mentally and to cope with the current dynamic is expect the worst. If you expect the worst, then if the worst doesn't happen or something good actually happens, you can celebrate it. But if you go around expecting anything but the worst, then you will be outraged every day and you cannot sustain that. And then you will shut down, which is the goal. So if you expect that the nominees, that the executive orders, that the action of this president and his groupies are going to be bad, then if it's not as bad as you expected, or their agenda gets thwarted, or then you can be happy about that and celebrate it. That is how I would just suggest coping with it day to day, number one. Then number two, find young people in your life. If you have kids, I have a 10-year-old. If you have nieces, nephews, neighbors, talk to kids. And everybody in this call is viewed as an expert in your community and in your family on politics, right? You're the ones who follow things. You're the one that gets on the Fair Fight Zoom. You're the one in the loop. What helps me a lot, again, in day to day, is when my kid has questions for me or we talk about it. And thinking about how to explain what's happening in an age-appropriate way to children is another great way to cope with this, because it makes you really ground it in truth, in truthful hope. And as the next generation is the one that's really going to be dealing with whatever the fallout here, I think it's, as a practice, it's incredibly grounding and helpful to do that with kids, because the adults around here, we've got to support this generation in thinking about this, whether they're college students or high school students. Young people are becoming more politically conservative, those who turn out and vote. So it's incumbent upon adults to take the time to help kids process this, not rush through their questions and answers, and be clear and age appropriate, and don't be fearful of it. So that's my number two. I have found that's not only awesome for the kid. I have a kid who's very inquisitive. Not all kids are, but I find it very helpful for me because it's very leveling to really think about what's the distilled most important thing. And then remember number three, which goes to LaTosha's piece. What has gotten us here individually, our families, and as a country will not get us there. So however you want to take that, whatever you've done in your activism is not going to be adequate for whatever the next level is. Whatever you have done with your family to help them cope through difficult times, whatever has gotten you here, you can think about Democratic leadership. The Democratic leadership who have gotten us here are not going to be the ones that get us there. So we talk about this a lot at Fair Fight, that what has gotten us here at Fair Fight,
right,
with the propaganda, with the media changes, with the empowerment of the other side, with everything we're up against, is not going to get us there. So that can mean, I just reflect on that a lot, which is like, what does that actually mean in my day-to-day life, and what lessons can I take? So for Fair Fight, what that means, I don't know what y'all are talking about at Black Voters Matter, LaTosha. We're thinking about how do we do our basics, our core pieces really well this year, but then how do we get intellectually curious? How do we pilot some new things this year? How do we innovate? How do we try some new things so that by the time we're in the beginning of 2026, we can reflect on how did our core plate of business go? How did we advance those priorities? And then what did we learn from kind of getting intellectually curious by piloting some things, having open conversations? So that might be another way to think about it, is 2025 is a year of tumult, change, chaos. As we get into 2026, we got to get really focused on how we're going to take majorities in Congress, how we elect good democracy leaders in the state, right? And we got to be focused on elections the whole time, obviously, because elections are being fraught every day and fought every day. But those are my three. Coping mechanisms to survive. Number two, get involved with the kids in your life and be a responsible adult to them. They are even more confused than we are. I don't care how old the kid is. And number three, what got us here will not get us there. So that might mean stepping up and becoming an elections official. It could mean all kinds of things for you. But those are kind of my three big items to share with y'all this fine evening at 7:59 Eastern time.
Thank you
People to
guys.
dream big, like
And dream,
dream big. Like if we're gonna be in this fight, let's be in this fight. Like we can't stop
right.
at the what we believe we're gonna win. We gotta fight for what we deserve. So I'm with you, Lauren. I'm dreaming. I'm fighting. I'm preparing.
We're fighting and we're dreaming and we're all in this together. We can't see everybody's face, but I hope you feel some solidarity. We are so not alone and at times can feel very isolating. So thank you, Nicole, for guiding us. Thank you, LaTosha, for your time. Thank you for everybody who is here this evening. Hopefully you
Thank
find
you
it
all for joining us.